6 signs to end a job interview immediately. It's okay to end or postpone an interview. Job interviews are traditionally seen as one-sided evaluation situations, but that's no longer true. Power imbalances, pressure tactics, or one-sided conversations are not appropriate today. Job interviews are business calls. If a conversation on equal footing is no longer possible, or you simply feel that something isn't right anymore, you don't have to sit through it until the end. If you no longer see any value in the conversation, it doesn't benefit either side. Yes, you are allowed to end an interview. Yes, you can ask to reschedule it or ask questions. No, you don't have to stay just because that's how it's usually done. We talk a lot about how we prepare for interviews, but that was never about what to do when you realize something isn't right. Also keep in mind that the behavior and processes during the application phase are an important indicator of what working together might look like later on. If basic things don't work, you should pay attention to those warning signs. Of course, this video is no legal advice. No structure, no agenda, and unbalanced speaking time. An interview is not a casual coffee chat. It's about a job and potentially a contract. If the conversation has no clear structure, no one explains the agenda, and the speaking time is extremely uneven, that says more than just nervousness. An interview without a clear plan doesn't feel spontaneous, it feels unprepared. You can politely ask, could you briefly explain the structure of our conversation today? Structure shows respect. If someone doesn't organize your time, they don't value it, especially if this involves your hiring manager or your potential future colleague. It's something to look at critically. Do you really want to be the one planning everything for them later on? Probably not. Interrogation instead of dialogue. Recruiting isn't an exam, it's a mutual decision-making process. If questions come one after another in rapid fire, there's no real reaction to your answers, and you don't feel like anyone is actually getting to know you. The dynamic is off. Many interviewers simply run through a memorized list of questions, often focused only on your resume and your past. You're not applying for mercy. Both sides are figuring out whether they are a good fit. You could say, I'd like to focus on a constructive discussion. Do you have specific questions or insights about the role? And you don't have to accept being constantly interrupted either. If a real dialogue isn't possible, you're allowed to respectfully end a conversation. Inappropriate questions. Some topics simply don't belong in a job interview. They are legally and ethically questionable. For example, private life plans, background or origin, marital status, pregnancy age, or anything that could lead to discrimination. Be aware that these questions are often asked indirectly. For example, how do you pronounce your last name? Where does it come from? We offer spots in our company daycare. Would that be a relevant benefit for you? Or questions that simply have nothing to do with the job or professional context. If you're thinking, this has nothing to do with my qualifications, trust that instinct. If something feels off or makes you feel uncomfortable, you don't have to sit through it. Don't answer inappropriate questions, and don't let yourself be pressured. Instead, calmly but clearly respond. I only answer questions related to the role. Let's focus on the position. If things escalate, you can say, I suggest we pause the interview here and reschedule for another time. If you're unsure, a neutral follow-up question can help clarify the situation. Unclear external participants in the interview. Transparency isn't a luxury, it's the minimum standard. When it comes to applicant data, there must be a serious reason for someone to have access to it. It should be clear who each person in the conversation is and what role they play in the process. With internal employees, this is usually not an issue, but with external participants like freelancers, it can quickly become problematic. That's a classic compliance risk. If you have even the slightest doubt about whether someone should be there, ask and consider ending the conversation until it's clarified. For example, could you briefly explain in what capacity you're involved in the hiring process? That's not mistrust. It's basic professional respect. Lack of preparation or missing information. If key questions about the role can't be answered or basic information remains unclear, you're allowed to point that out. Certain aspects of the role are still open. Would it make sense to clarify this internally first and then continue the conversation later? Unpaid work or information phishing. Never share confidential information, for example, from your current employer. These questions are often hidden. Which tools do you use daily for Process X in your company? What could our roadmap look like for the next 6 months? What would be your first idea once you join? Never reveal internal strategies or blockers, numbers, customer data, names of internal tools, product developments, market details, or competitor analysis. A simple response. I'm unfortunately not allowed to share that, but I'd be happy to talk about general trends, your vision, or my strength in this area. Never work for free. Ending an interview politely doesn't mean slamming doors. It means being mindful of your time and your data. It's a sign of confidence. Sometimes the most professional thing you can do is simply recognize when something isn't the right fit. Have you ever experienced something like this?